Baby, it's a Mark Scheifele world, and we're all just living in it. The sole franchise record holder for points with 813, Scheifele stands atop the mountain of Jetsdom.
Your Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, big things ahead for the Jets franchise. We have our brand new Jets franchise record points holder in Mark Scheifele. 813 points. It didn't even take him 3 minutes. That's pretty friggin' crazy, especially for a guy who has been there since day one, the first draft pick in this franchise's history, of course, and now he has ascended the mountain to become the franchise's all-time scoring leader. So, amazing accomplishment. I want to talk about his game against the Preds and how the Jets did in general, talk about this evening's game against the Flames, and talk about some continuing struggles for the Manitoba Moose. It has not been all smooth sailing with the Jets partner franchise, and for a lot of reasons, there might be some concerns about what happens now. With the Moose kind of needing to really make the most of a much improved roster and all of these internal developments that have gotten this team to a much better state. The fact that it's not leading to good results on the ice is probably something that's a little bit disconcerting. Before we dive into all of the good and the bad, though, did want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So, let's start off with the fun stuff first. Winnipeg, Nashville, the Jets down the Preds 4-1. I called 3-1 as my score prediction. I came real close again. I keep getting within a goal or so of these predictions. A little bit bummed, though, that Hellebuyck did not get a shutout. I thought that would have been nice to maintain. Unfortunately, the shutout was broken pretty late in the game, but otherwise, Hellebuyck was about as sterling as it possibly gets. And what was kind of interesting about this outing was that the Jets were actually a little loose after a very dominant start. Once the second period rolled around, the Jets kind of backed off, and you could sort of tell that Nashville was eager to make a bit of a statement. The Preds ended up actually outshooting Winnipeg like 31-24, and I would say that they certainly had some of the edge at times in some of the created chances and stuff. But I think the biggest storyline is that, the Jets went up pretty early in this game, got a 2-0 lead, and then just sort of, I wouldn't say coasted, but they didn't really push as aggressively as they could in other circumstances. And I think it's interesting to see them do this against a team like Nashville, where, the Preds don't have as much of an offensive threat. But I'll tell you this time, they did kind of prey on the Jets' defense. The lack of foot speed on Winnipeg's back end and really the lack of defensive awareness was a little bit of an issue. Thankfully, though, it just doesn't matter. Sometimes your Jets' top stars and players really stand up, and, none really embody this quite like Mark Scheifele getting .813 in literally less than 3 minutes of ice time, right? For the Jets to do this, so early in the game, get that celebration out of the way, it was really friggin' cool. There wasn't a lot of fanfare of the usual sense. They didn't stop the game like they did with, Ovechkin's final milestone goal, which makes sense, right? You still got work to do. But this was just cool, right? And it came on a beautiful power play slap shot, I guess, if you want to call it. It was a crazy angle, just pure Mark Scheifele at his best. He's been unstoppable. If I was talking about him last episode as being a guy who seems to be a pretty early favorite for Team Canada, I don't see how this really stops him now. This dude just keeps scoring. He is on a mission to prove that he is good enough for Team Canada. I don't see how you can keep him off if this holds up. And, I said last episode, I think he hits triple-digit points this year. he's kind of well on pace to do it, man. This is an amazing year for him, a great start, and especially when the Jets need a lot of their top players to stand up and help out while they're so shorthanded. It's really great to see, Scheifele and Connor, really stand up and do their thing. The only guy on the top line who I haven't really noticed as much is Velarde, and it's not like he's playing poorly. He just hasn't been as much of a factor. So I wonder, as guys start to get healthier, do you maybe think about how you can get more out of Gabe? Um, he's a super talented player, and I think at 5v5 he can be, an impressive force. I just feel like maybe, on that top line isn't the best spot for him. But, if he stays up there, it's fine. We sort of know how that trio plays. But as long as Scheifele and Connor keep carrying the load, man, you're probably not too worried. Elsewhere, you had contributions from Niederreiter, Nemesnikov, Logan Stanley even scored. This is Stanley's first ever two-goal season, so congrats to him. I'm sure scoring one goal every year has to feel a little bit annoying, and now you get your second or your first ever multi-goal season, your second goal of the year. Can he get 3 or 4? Who's to say? Also of note, Jonathan Toews with his first ever multi-point game for the Jets. A nice little feather to his early cap as a Winnipeg player, a couple of points in these first 5 or so games. I still think we haven't really seen his best yet. I think what's nice is that the floor is relatively high, and that's good news. If he has one bad game out of 5, but the rest he's at least break even, and he's contributing some assists and stuff, you really can't complain about that. That's a lot better than it could have been, and I think for where his game is already, you just have to think that as he starts feeling more and more comfortable and gets up to speed, maybe he's got a little more juice left in the tank. So great stuff all around. If I had to say anything that could use some work, obviously this Jets defense is still on the slower side and still dealing with some issues on the back end. I don't know that there's any real way to cover up the second and third pairings. Colin Miller can come in and try and help. He'll at least make it slightly better. I don't know how much that really makes a difference in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, the Jets blue line definitely could use some help. On the subject of like rotation and stuff, had it been a different scenario, I sort of wonder if Salamanson might have been given, an opportunity to take some shifts here and see if he can do something. I think he's closer to the NHL than it appears. After this year with the Moose, I have to think, maybe next year he's got a real chance at making the team. Schen's contract will be up. Miller's contract will be up. I don't know that either would necessarily be re-upped. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think, the organization's very high on Salamanson. I think if you can get a right side of DeMello, Pionk, and Salamanson, throughout the season starts to earn more and more responsibility, that's a pretty great right side, especially when you already have a left side of, Sandberg, Morrissey, and somebody else on the third pairing. So, yeah, some good signs there, some interesting stuff, but just probably not this season. As far as this Preds game is concerned, if there are any final takeaways, Nino Niederreiter getting a multi-point game. Niederreiter, Nemesnikov, and Nyquist have played really well together. That could be an interesting trio to try and keep together, though we sort of know that once Lowry's healthy, which, by the way, he is back in a yellow practice jersey, they'll probably go back to the well with their usual line combinations. But I like this 3-on line. It's played really well. It's doing some good forechecking work. They have scored multiple points. I don't really know if you want to break them up yet. They seem to have found a little bit of a chemistry component. So good to see. The team of Unks doing a good job. That's what we want out of this Winnipeg team. As long as they can survive this stretch above 500, that's really about as good as you could possibly ask for. Get healthy, you'll start to drive play then, and you can work on the rest from there. But, of course, the Jets have more work to do tonight. They'll take on the Calgary Flames. Want to chat about that game and what to expect against one of the league's worst offenses in Calgary coming right up. Before we do, though, wanted to shout out our friends and partners at Monarch. Let's be honest, most of us can't even name all our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface, on your laptop or your phone. Monarch can help you organize your accounts, track your spending, and get a better handle on your investments without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. If you're somebody who has loads of, subscription services, Monarch can help you trim those down and figure out where you're wasting a few extra dollars that you need to. You also have shared partner tools, right? If you've got a partner or a spouse, you can set financial goals together, stay on the same page, and always be held accountable when you need to. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us tonight's episode as we are chatting a little bit about Winnipeg and the next couple of games. Obviously, chief among them this evening is a trip to Calgary, which will be interesting. The Jets are certainly favored in this game, and I don't think that's really anything to be surprised by. I'm just going to say up front, I think Winnipeg wins like 4-1, maybe even 5-1 tonight. I feel pretty good about this game for the Jets, right? Winnipeg usually doesn't, slack off against bad teams like this, and I don't want to be like harsh or mean, but the Flames are bad, and I think they kind of know it. They are 1-4 so far to start the season, and their only win came in a shootout against the Oilers, which, look, that's impressive. But then you followed that up. Sorry, they're actually 1-5. They followed that up with losses to the Canucks, to the Blues, to the Mammoth, and twice to Vegas. Now, some of these teams are legitimately strong opponents. I would say this start to their season is even harder than what the Jets have had. But, all the same, the Flames have one of the lowest performing offenses. They're creating some of the least opportunities. They have one of the worst power plays. There's really not a lot going right for them. If there's a franchise that legitimately needs a Gavin McKenna, I don't know if there's another team out there other than Calgary that desperately needs the help. So, I don't know what this season holds for the Flames. I don't know if they're going to start selling, a fire sale, or if they're trying to make any trades. They need something. This franchise just, man, it's been hard, right? Ever since Johnny left and Monahan left, a lot of guys have kind of come and go. Their best player is probably Nazem Kadri. And in that, scenario, you're starting to kind of see why maybe they're not really having the best run of form rate lately. Kadri's still amazing. The rest of the team, maybe not so much. How they're lining up right now, they've got Huberdeau, Kadri, and Farabee on your first, Sharangovich, Frost, and Coronado on the second, Hanzek, Backlund, and Coleman on your third, and then Lomberg, Zeri, and Klapka on your fourth. On defense, you've got Hanley and Uyghur as your first pairing, Bean and Anderson as your second, and then Ball and Perek as your third. In goal, obviously, it's going to be either Wolf or Cooley, probably Wolf. Yeah, man, I don't know. Like, they were talking about trying to bring in another goalie to either help with Wolf or something. I don't really know. Honestly, if you're shopping for a netminder, you are just looking at the wrong problem here. Look at this Flames defense, for instance. You have Hanley on your first pairing, and like your left side is Hanley, Bean, and Ball. That is not an NHL caliber left side. Your right side's actually pretty good. Uyghur, Anderson, Perek. Perek is still very young and is going to have a lot of rookie moments, but compare that to the left side, and yeah, I just don't really know what the Flames expect. Surely, Huska and company have to know that this team is going to be hurting, right? They're just not capable of generating much. They're not stopping much. And, guys like Sharangovich and Frost and Coronado and a few others really haven't been able to live up to either their new contracts or expectations. Whatever it is you want to describe, they've all just really been struggling. Coronado's probably had, the better run of form amongst all these guys. But, Coleman, Backlund, how many of these players are really finding success? And so it makes me wonder, as we start getting deeper into the season, will Calgary make some trades? The Jets could potentially find some, forward talent here that just needs to be given a different change of scenery. I think there are individual skaters here that are very good, but right now, amidst all of these struggles with Calgary, they're just being buried badly. So keep an eye out for that. Blake Coleman, I'm sure, still has something left in the tank. Connor Zary is still very good. I can't imagine that he's going to go from being, a really promising middle to top six talent to being a career fourth liner. I just doubt that that's going to be his outlook going forward. Morgan Frost had a really promising last year. Can't imagine that him putting up like 5 even strength points in his last 30 or 40 games is the real him. I just feel like there's a lot that's going on with this team, and the continued losses and lack of success only makes things harder for everyone. So, in theory, the Jets should probably feast on this team. What will be interesting with Winnipeg here is if they make any lineup adjustments, right? You've had Ford for a couple of games. Chibrakov's been sitting for a little bit. Intriguingly, the Jets just recalled Brad Lambert, right? And Lambert was expected to return after the Moose weekend. I'm sure getting him out of Manitoba is probably a bit of a helpful thing. We'll talk about why in a little bit. Not been a good start for the Moose, though. But in terms of this Jets lineup, if I would make any adjustments, I'd probably get Pearson back on the fourth line. I think Tanner has been okay in some scenarios, but, Pearson and Taves together have not been very good, and I feel like they just need someone else up there that's a little bit faster. Pearson, I think, in a very limited role on the fourth line will feast. In the top six, though, not nearly as convinced. I would keep, the triple N line together. The top line probably doesn't need to be adjusted right now, but I would do some changes to that second line. So far, it's really not impressed me, and this makes me wonder if maybe Brad Lambert comes in, right? Lambert is part of this rotation, I would imagine. Winnipeg has kind of hinted that they do think they've got something in one of Chibrakov or Lambert or Ford. Some of these guys have a chance to maybe win one of the last spots on the roster, and so this is maybe the chance where Lambert comes in, right? Obviously his start to the Moose season has kind of been a little chaotic, and I don't know that it's necessarily on him. Having watched the Moose, that team is just, yeah. So I think that this is about as good an opportunity as it gets to try and give Lambert a few games. You don't have to necessarily. You could keep Ford in. You could keep Chibrakov in instead. Either way, I don't really care. I just think it's nice to get a different look, right? And I think with Lambert, compared to maybe a Chibrakov or a Ford or a Pearson, he's got real top six upside. I think Chibrakov kind of does, but Lambert has some of the most, elite tools and skating ability of any Jets prospect. So if he can make something happen alongside Taves and Iafallo, I think that's where, Winnipeg would have a lot of interest. If you can internally get a big wing upgrade without having to trade for one, that would be phenomenal. And look, Lambert may not earn himself a long-term spot immediately out of these next couple of games, but if he comes in, does a bang-up job, and shows that he can be relied upon in the very near future, this gives the Jets a much clearer picture of what they might need to look for if they're trying to make a trade, right? The 2C role probably does need to be addressed at some point. I don't quite know how they're going to do that. Obviously Taves has been okay there, but probably not ideal. Lowry is, in terms of the two-way game, very strong. Finishing ability, a little more questionable. That's kind of been an issue, but he'll do a lot of the other stuff. Again, coming off of that double hip surgery, will it be, the same level that he was before? I can't tell you. So going to be a bit of a question to be determined. But I think, for this game at least, Winnipeg may keep this lineup as is. Iafallo, Taves, Pearson, CSV, the 3N line, and Koepke, Barron, and Ford, because you're facing a softer opponent that has had a couple of guys who have tried to run the Jets before. We know the Flames are a very physical team, even though they're bad. They will try and kneecap you at times. They've done it before. Not exactly a shocker when Pospisil has run Perfetti like twice now. So they may want to kind of have this more veteran-heavy, more physical team. I'm not sure how it's going to play out in terms of this game getting nasty, but we know that games against Calgary have been pretty bloody and brutal before. So maybe Winnipeg will want a little more of an enforcers sort of look. Keep an eye out for that. I'd imagine somebody drops the gloves at some point during this game. Calgary themselves may want a bit of a fight just because they need some energy. They need some sort of inspiration. Whatever they've got going on right now has not been good enough, and I'm sure a lot of the players are feeling a ton of pressure to not only perform, but also just have some pride out there. The way that they're losing, how they've lost, who they're losing to, it has to feel kind of dispiriting all the time. And in some ways, I do feel bad for the players. They're on a bit of a sinking ship. And yes, it may lead to a really bright future in the McKenna type, but they need like 3 or 4 of these guys to be a competent NHL franchise in the future. So long, long road ahead for the Flames. And I can't imagine a game against the Jets is going to make that any easier. So Winnipeg, I expect a 4 or 5-1 win, maybe even 4-2, 5-2, something like that. But, wouldn't be shocked if things get a little bit crazy in Winnipeg's favor. But drop your score predictions below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Speaking of things getting a little out of hand, I want to chat about how one of our other squads in the organization, the Manitoba Moose, have been. Had a chance to watch some of the game in between the Preds game. And yeah, let's just say things didn't exactly go super well. We'll chat about why coming right up. Before we do, though, wanted to shout out our friends and partners at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put $5 down, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. If you're somebody who loves tracking individual player or team stats, this is the best way to weaponize your knowledge. Get the inside competitive edge in individual matchups, or maybe you think you know who's going to win the league MVP. Maybe you have insight into who's going to win the upcoming weekend matchups. No matter what team you back, though, this is the best way to make your Sunday fun day football watching weekend action so much more entertaining, right? Who doesn't love a good bit of extra action and potentially extra cash to win even more? $5, $300 in bonus bets. Who could possibly say no? So, what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us in tonight's episode as we are just wrapping up real quick with some thoughts on the Manitoba Moose having a really, really rough start. Now, I know like the AHL is not exactly the world's most respected league in some circles. There are fans out there who will talk about AHL hockey as being trash and stuff. I think it's actually really important to have a very successful, multifaceted level of competitiveness throughout your organization. And so I really appreciated when the Jets went over above and beyond to try and make this team a much more competitive outfit this year. I think that was a really, really, really great decision. So I can't imagine anyone's happy to see them 1-3 to start the year. Yes, you've got 68 games left, but I think the fact that the Jets, or the baby Jets, have only scored 10 goals, but conceded 15 after all of these overhauls with the roster, you've rebuilt the back end, you upgraded the forward group by a huge margin, and yet in 4 games, you're averaging 2.5 goals for. That's just not good enough. I think the Moose probably know this. I think the Moose coaching staff knows this. And what really stood out in these first few games for me is how disorganized the team is. They're very passive. They often look like they're in multiple like zonal marking schemes and stuff. And players just don't seem to be on the same page at all. I think a textbook example of this, and I don't remember if I mentioned this last week, but there was a sequence where like Ville Heinola was passing to what should have been an outlet along the right boards. That winger was staring at the bench, and I don't know if he was going off for a line change or not, but it led to a direct counter against, and that's just not something that you usually see happening in a structured game. The Moose play really ugly hockey, and this is probably some of the most frustrating hockey I've seen. I've heard over the years people complain about Morrison and the coaching staff not making a particularly competent group out of this Moose roster. I thought, maybe it was a talent issue, right? The Moose haven't exactly had a lot of firepower the last several seasons. But now that you have one of the top rosters in the league, there's really no excuse for them to look like this. And yes, people will say give it, 5-10 games before you start ranting. But I think we have enough of a track record of struggles here to where it's a trend. And, given how I've seen some of these players elsewhere perform really well, even guys like Fagemo and Clegg and a few others, we know that they're great AHLers. We know that they're elite AHLers. So to see everyone look completely disorganized, like they're passing to no one in particular, like they can't make basic breakout passes or zone entries. I mean, this is just like peewee level stuff that's happening. I don't usually get mad watching hockey. It's rare where I feel pissed off by the level of disorganization or lack of quality tactics. But this Moose team to start looks so bad that I feel like you need to make a change quickly. The whole point of overhauling this roster was to make a more supportive environment for the youth. You have a lot of really talented kids. A lot of them are going to be really frustrated and annoyed if they can't get things together. And more worryingly, you don't want them to learn and pick up the wrong habits. Develop good skills, make sure that they're engaged the way that you want them to be, and develop them the right way. And what I'm seeing with the Moose so far is like the exact opposite. Lambert obviously has had his own issues over the past several years, but like watching him go from a guy who dropped like a 50 plus point season to like 30 points last year, and he's already pointless through the first few games this year. It's just weird, right? It's not something that you would ever expect. And so I don't really advocate for coaching changes too often. I feel like that's a really risky and at times unkind thing, but I just think for the future of this team and for these kids, you might need to make an adjustment sooner than later. The way that this Moose team is trending early on, it's not good, and it doesn't feel like the kind of thing where if you give it time, it's just going to iron out. These are pretty systemic issues that feel like they've been long-standing, and at some point, you're going to have to figure out what it is that you want out of this team. If your whole goal was to make the squad more competitive, more engaging, and a much more supportive developmental environment, this is probably not going to be the way to do it. There are only 7 teams in this division, and Manitoba's already scrapping at the bottom of the division just a few games into the year. Yeah, you can argue it's only 4 games into the season, but there's not that much ground that you have to fall behind and be able to make up later in the season. If you dig yourself an early hole like this, you're not going to be able to get yourself out in a couple of months. So hopefully the Moose really correct course here. This is a very talented roster. I think they're a potential Calder Cup champion, but they can't do anything until this roster and coaching staff gets on the same page. So a lot of work to do, but it's a good thing that the season is still young and there is time to fix this. Let me know how you're feeling about the success or lack thereof for the Moose. Drop your thoughts and comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Tomorrow, obviously, we'll have a recap of Winnipeg versus Calgary, hoping for gold stars and a big victory. But for tonight's show, that's going to be all the time that we have. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets go.